So here's a completely pointless, non-political, kind of, non-real estate related little video of Capitol Hill. The purpose of it is mainly just that our trees are flowering. I'll be sneezing to prove that. These are not artificial trees. And besides our trees flowering, it's a sunny day that's really pretty. All of DC's expensive crony capitalist lobbyist congressman real estate is like that house, that gigantic house. All looks really good in the sunshine with the flowering trees. So why not make a little video of it while it lasts? This is Stanton Park, which is really close to Capitol Hill. It's essentially only 2 or 3 blocks away from where all the congressional office buildings start. And I may have to mainly show you the traffic unless I can cross the street, because the direction I'm walking is all sunshine, and you won't be able to see anything if I lean the camera forward. But I'm hoping the light will change. It's changing, and I can actually go into the park, and then we can video the park without videoing traffic along the park. Anyway, this is Stanton Park. I'm sure it's named after that guy, who I'm sure is General Stanton, who's probably someone involved in the Civil War, because that's basically how DC parks usually work. Sometimes the Revolutionary War, sometimes another war. Anyway, DC has a lot of these green spaces, mainly in yuppie, politically connected areas, and all the bureaucrats walk their babies and dogs here. Bureaucrats and lobbyists. Anyway, that white building you're seeing on the straight ahead in the center of the screen, on the edge of the block, on the edge of that block, is where I think it and maybe the little gray building beside it too, that's where the Heritage Foundation was in 1980, before they got a lot of money and Reagan was elected, and they moved about 3 or 4 blocks away and got a gigantic building. Here's one of the many old historic churches in DC. Current DC residents are not really church goers, so they don't use them. Frequently they're African American churches, and then there are people who use them, but they're people who live in Prince George's County, and they come back to DC from Maryland and park big SUVs and Escalades and other cars with Maryland plates in front of their church they grew up in. But actual DC people don't go to these churches. So I have a feeling that overall the churches are slowly shrinking in number, being sold off and turned into commercial property and condos, or just being torn down and something else being built. I haven't actually researched that though, so I could be wrong. I just see churches like this one for sale much more often than I see someone building a new church. Like there's a church on 14th Street that was kind of Hispanic church, immigrant church in a storefront, and it recently was torn down, and they built like a 10-story glass loft type structure that has a lot of retail in it, and up above are apartments. This row, although they look like townhouses, that side of Stanton Park, are commercial spaces. 3 or 4 of them were just for sale for $1 million and something a piece, around $1 million. And Go Proud used to rent the basement of one, the little Republican gay group. And over here, I think this side is more commercial. More residential, rather. And I think this piece is more residential. This is my walk to work, depending on which office I use. Service. And this is daytime DC traffic. People people coming in from Maryland and from Anacostia to work in downtown DC. This is Maryland Avenue, which eventually terminates at the Capitol, right at the Supreme Court, about 6 blocks from here, behind me. And it also passes by the building that belongs to the foundation that is the remnant of the National Women's Party, the Suffragette Party, which is also near the Supreme Court. Across the street, see how the streets are kind of split off from each other at angles. That's because in DC, streets named after states or Canadian provinces, mainly states, but a few. There's a Columbia, there's an Ontario, are always at an angle to the normal Cartesian grid of DC. The Cartesian grid is numbered streets and lettered streets and alphabetically ordered streets. So that's D over there, sort of at a sharp angle from Maryland, which is the one that all the traffic's on. I actually sold one of those houses that we're looking at on D Street a couple of years back. This is kind of rare. You only see so many of these in DC, a garage. I'm not even sure it's still open. Hold on, maybe. There's one around here that's closed. On the end of the block, you see a very large building. It's a public library. Looks like it's already open. And then you see something up ahead with a turret. A lot of things like that are schools. And because charter schools have been eating up the public schools in DC because nobody wants to go to the public schools because they're so bad. A lot of the gigantic old school buildings have been slowly turned into condos, including several here on Capitol Hill. These houses, the large ones you see, 2 and 3 story, would very rarely currently sell for less than $900,000. And the 2-story ones, especially in this area, would very rarely sell for less than $600,000 or $700,000. Partly depend on whether they have parking. If they have parking, they'll be much more expensive, even if it's just one parking space. They'll be more expensive than a house that has the same size backyard if the one house has a landlocked backyard that, there's the public library. One house has a landlocked backyard that you can't get to because there's no alley. It will be, I would say, probably $75,000 to $100,000 less than one where you can actually manage to drive down an alley and park. Especially if you can also close a gate or something. This is partly because DC gets such a huge amount of revenue by viciously ticketing people at all times if they park for any length of time on the street. Anything really over about 2 hours, unless you live in the neighborhood. If you live in the neighborhood, you can buy an expensive permit which entitles you to park your car on the street. Except you have to move it constantly because they're always claiming that they're sweeping one side or another of the street. And they even do kind of sweep it. But you have to constantly move it. If you don't move it, you get ticketed and towed. So almost everybody with a car in DC is desperate for a parking space. And DC, unlike Bethesda, does not really build any public parking garages. Also doesn't really apparently give out any kind of permits for people to build commercial garages. So there are only commercial garages downtown attached to office buildings as a rule. Very few in residential areas. So parking's just at a premium everywhere. Anyway, this is Northeast DC. I think this street has ended up in one of my tapes before.
Yeah.
Now it's here again. I must be late because this coffee place doesn't open usually until 8. I thought it was much earlier.